You find yourself at a nightclub, beer in hand, talking to a strange woman you just met. She's already invited you to another club located at an abandoned mine just down the road. Before that, you were wandering around the town deaf, dumb, and blind, looking for your new boss, whom you may or may not have found. Before that even, you just got off the boat to your new home, the small island of Dorsberg, whom nobody's mysteriously ever heard of before, and the Dvotchki Hotel, a rundown dump with a weird owner. At this point, the only thing you know for sure is that you're supposed to be selling soda, and that is far from an exaggeration. Developers often talk about their games not holding the player's hand, wearing it as some kind of badge of honor. Most of the time, I think we all just roll our eyes and giggle. But that is not the case with else.HeartBreak, or else.HeartBreak, or else.Heart.Break. Parentheses, I don't actually know how you're supposed to pronounce it. A game developed by about 9 different people who don't go under any combined studio names, so nobody can tell you who made this game without listing off a bunch of hard to pronounce Swedish names for half an hour. The game is weird, is what I'm trying to say here. I don't know if I should tell you to go into this game blind, or if you should read every guide, watch every video, and possibly consult with your doctor before playing it. A lot of this game's charm comes from leaving you just as clueless as its main character, Sebastian, and learning to just roll with the punches like it's nothing the same way he does. So, you know what? If you're remotely interested in this game from what you've seen so far, go play it now before I gab too much about it. Trust me, you're going to love it. Unless you're one of those gamers who needs a solid structure to follow, in which case you'll hate else.HeartBreak because there is no objective marker, no quest log, or much in the way of hints as to what you're supposed to be doing. Your only starting knowledge is that you're at Dorsberg selling soda. You don't know who your boss is or where to find them, you don't know how to sell the soda, where to get it, or what it tastes like, you don't even know how much you're supposed to be selling it for, or what to do with the money you make. To anyone who's played this game for half an hour and gave up, there is a set narrative and path that you're roughly supposed to be following. I, possibly like many players, was surprised when I realized there's an actual narrative and gameplay structure here in which you need to progress, rather than this just being a big, weird sandbox in which you sell Wellspring soda, which nobody seems to like. But you don't actually have to sell this soda as far as I can tell. You can willingly ignore your job, or even sell as little as a can or two a day and not face any repercussions. Strange considering Wellspring is paying for your room and travel, which means that yes, Wellspring is most certainly up to something. Spoiler alert, I guess. So if this isn't a door-to-door salesman simulator, what is it? Well, that question is hard to answer. As well as the mysterious elements of both the plot and gameplay, it's also unlike any game I've ever played before, for better or for worse. Dorsberg is relatively large and an open world for you to explore. You go around talking to people either to sell them soda, to advance the plot, get directions, or just for the sake of chatting them up. Eventually, through sheer trial and error, you'll get your hands on a modifier, and that is where the game really begins. There's a strange group in Dorsberg known as the Ministry, which has Big Evil Corporation written all over it. Eventually you run into this manic hippie girl called Pixie, stalk her for a while, and after she yells at you for it, tells you that the Ministry is somehow controlling mines, and that her group is trying to put a stop to it. This is where I ran into my first big problem in a game that I think is pretty full of them. The game oddly expects you to care about Pixie after spending all of 2 minutes talking to her, even pretty much forcing you to stalk her. I think most people playing the game know that it's wrong to just follow her around like this, but the game and Sebastian each both seem to think that it's somehow a startling revelation when she gets mad at you for it. She's not very interesting, but the game sets her up as the love interest, right up until she drops the bomb that she has a boyfriend. I think this is supposed to be a gee, Sebastian sure has a terrible life kind of thing, but I don't really care? I mean, I'm not interested in her, but Sebastian is smitten and the game expects you to care just as much and thus centers much of the plot around her. The only reason you ever get the modifier is to join her group so you can spend more time with her, but She's never really fleshed out as a character, but more of just a plot device. And trying to get that modifier is no easy task. Again, this is a game that doesn't really tell you much of anything. There are multiple ways to get the modifier, and the one I went with is by befriending the hotel's janitor until he gave me one, and then he and some gardener started giving me my lessons with it. But getting the thing is only half the battle, maybe even less than that, as else.HeartBreak's other big gameplay element finally introduces itself. It works like this. The modifier is basically a computer that you can plug into anything. Literally anything, including but not limited to trash cans, soda, and doors, and change the code of the game itself to make them do different things. For instance, you can hook the modifier up to a door to lock or unlock it, or you can go really crazy and hack an actual computer and make it do all kinds of things, or you could hack a light post or even other people. It's a great mechanic that uses real computer coding, something you have to learn while playing the game if you don't already know it. But it also kind of typifies one of the things I don't like about the game. You have hidden meters for your health, sleep, hunger, thirst, and tiredness. Most of it's pretty easy to deal with, except cleanliness. As you play the game, you'll eventually get dirty and stinky and attract flies, and people just won't want to be around you. But there's no way to actually clean yourself, as sinks and showers don't do anything for some reason, and of course, the game doesn't tell you what you're supposed to be doing. The only way to even find out how to clean yourself is by either stumbling upon it by accident and realize it's happening, or to have to wait to get your modifier and just happen to mess with a specific object you need. Or of course, just looking it up online like I did. You see, to clean yourself, you have to drink a bottle of water. No, that doesn't mean use the water to shower, you simply drink it. Once you get the modifier, you can see this specific code where it talks about cleanliness, and you can hack it to give you more cleanliness points, so you never really have to use it again. But it's ridiculous how this system works. How does drinking water get you cleaned? Why is that a thing, and why doesn't the game tell you about this crazy thing? You know, I can understand not having objective markers or a big comprehensive map that tells you exactly where you are at any given moment or telling you what you're supposed to be doing. That all makes sense. That's easily mirrored after real life, but not being able to use a sink or a shower to clean yourself and instead having to drink water to do it is ridiculous. I think that's what really frustrates me about this game. It's such a mixed bag that it really shows it. Being able to hack objects to give yourself extra benefits is great, but having to first figure out what gives you benefits and that you even need them at all is really frustrating. I love it when a game just lets the player loose and tells them to figure it out on their own, and I think too many games these days hold the player's hand too much, but I think else.HeartBreak takes it the opposite direction. There's no guidance at all, so you're constantly feeling lost and like you're doing something wrong. It's kind of fun at first, and I guess it makes thematic sense with the story, but as you round your 5th hour still performing menial tasks that never seem to advance the story, it gets mind-numbingly tedious. But on the other hand, there are so many great ideas here. What other games can you think of that not only forms its gameplay around coding, but teaches you to code by directly altering the game's own code? What other game gives you that level of freedom? A big part of that freedom is Dorsberg itself. In reality, it's pretty small, but it feels so much bigger than it actually is because it's so dense. You do get a map pretty early on, but it is just a map. It's not a GPS that magically tells you where you are, so you have to figure out where you are based on certain landmarks. There's so much going on here that it feels like a real town with its own culture and its own people. You don't just show up and own the place. When you first get there, nobody cares. You're on your own, you have no friends, nobody particularly wants to be your friend, and they definitely don't want to buy your shitty soda. But as you explore, you learn your way around, and you meet more people and become friends with them. You learn that culture and see places you didn't even know existed when you first got there. But then that's countered by the writing. This is a story-driven game, but there isn't enough of it. The writing itself is good, but for the most part, the characters are bland and conversations always seem to end sooner than you think they should. Just when you're starting to get to know someone or figure out a new piece of the plot, they abruptly walk away and leave your ass in the dust. The game also uses diegetic music, which is a film term meaning there is no music played anywhere in the game unless it's physically coming from something within the game world. So for example, if you're walking down the street or you're in the harbor or somewhere you wouldn't expect to hear music in real life, there is no music. But if you're at a party where there's a radio or a DJ playing, then there is music, but only coming from the speakers in the game. This works in film because the plot is always moving forward. People are talking a lot more often, and generally there's a lot more going on. There are a lot more sound effects that you hear. This technique doesn't really work in games though, because the player is controlling the pacing. In a game like else.HeartBreak.com with an open world, somewhat confusing level design, and the fact that you have to constantly figure everything out for yourself, you'll often find yourself constantly walking around silent levels, hearing nothing but your footsteps, if that even, and occasionally a water fountain. And the thing about these indie games is there often aren't a lot of sound effects anyway. You don't hear the sound effects of a real town, like, I don't know, people walking around, birds chirping, cars going by, people yelling out windows, air conditioners going off as you walk past. Just anything that you would expect to hear in a city. It's generally silent. I found myself loving else.HeartBreak.com, I already made that joke, when I first played it, mindlessly engrossed in its first 4 or 5 hours, desperately wanting to figure out what's going to happen next, and trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But after that, I just lost all interest, so much so that I quit playing outright. The modifier is a curse as much as it is a blessing. If you don't know coding, then you're gonna have a hard time figuring it out here. There are tutorials in-game, but outside the absolute basics, it's all given to you in book form, which you first have to find each individual chapter of scattered throughout the city, which you have to read in order, otherwise it won't make sense, and then figure out how to even read it because you need to do some coding to access the chapters. Plus there's no way to actually really practice that well without actually interfering with objects in the game, and I just felt scared I was going to screw something up beyond repair. There are a lot of great ideas on offer here, which is why it's in From Indie with Love, but I don't think the developers did a very good job executing on them. It feels great to piece things together for yourself, and it does a great job of making you feel like a young adult trying to make their way in a big city away from their parents for the first time, but the learning curve is so steep with the modifier, it just puts me off. I think if they just got rid of that thing and just focused on just trying to make your way in a new city for the first time on your own, it would have been so much better. And every great point seems to be offset by something else. The story is great, but the characters are dull. The modifier is a great gameplay mechanic, but it's so difficult to learn how to use, you could possibly never progress in the game. You never feel like you're being guided around by the hand, but you also feel like you're lost in a sea of people in another country whose language you don't speak. The art is truly fantastic, which I haven't mentioned, but you can see for yourself, but the lack of any music can make walking around many areas just boring. I want to love else.HeartBreak, but I just can't. It's not me, it's you, game. I'm sorry. That being said, if you know a thing or two about computer programming and don't mind having to figure absolutely every aspect of the plot and gameplay out for yourself, this one is definitely for you. That's a very strange demographic, but I'm sure it exists somewhere. And even though I don't really love this game, I am very excited about whatever the developers are working on next to see if they learned their lessons this first time around. Fingers crossed. If you enjoyed this episode of From Indie with Love, why not subscribe to our channel for more, as well as other videos as well, like Kicked or Tales from Early Access. If you love indie gaming, head on over to clickus.com for all the news, previews, interviews, and a whole lot more you'll ever need. And why not consider supporting us on Patreon? Every little bit helps to keep providing you with quality content. As always, thank you for watching, and come back next time.